A large model Showman'S engine part 39, fitting the brass trim to the motion guards. And the good news is, there's not much more to do on this. Once these motion guards are painted and fitted to the engine, and I get the passenger truck back from the powder coating company, I'll be able to drive it about. But before all that, I need to finish the motion guards. And in this episode, I'm showing how I fitted the brass strips to the top of the guards. Originally, the plan was to have 2 brass trims on each motion guard, but when I held the brass strips against the motion guards, it just didn't look good with 2 of them on each panel. You've seen me do this before in a previous episode. Now I'm using the correct thickness of brass. This is 3mm brass. It's a bit harder to bend in my very small bending rollers, but I get there in the end. It's worth noting that you cannot bend the very end of the brass, because it just falls out of the roller. So I'm bending it a little bit inboard of where it really should be. Doing it this way makes it so that I get a very smooth and even bend, and I'll just chop off the end of it using my bandsaw. There's a bit of a knack in using these bending rollers. You have to get the pressure even at both sides, and for that reason I'm actually adjusting both sides with the Allen key, but you can't see the one on the left. If you make the adjustment on one side only, then you're going to run into a problem, because the bend will not be good at all. It just won't be in the right place. So here, as you can see, I'm overbending the part, because don't forget I'm going to chop off the end bit. Here I'm using a soft hammer just to align things. Please note I'm using the hide part of the hammer, not the copper part. Once I'd persuaded the bend of the brass strip to correspond with the bend on the plate, everything was okay. I've just marked it out with a scriber, which tells me where to chop the end off. The next part of the job is a bit of a drilling frenzy. I'm using my Proxxon motor tool for this because it's very useful and very small and very convenient. Similar to other highly priced motor tools, these Proxxons are really good. You still have a lot of power when the speed controller is on a lower setting, and the battery lasts for ages. Usually with cheap motor tools you get halfway through a job like this and then the battery goes flat. After I drilled the first hole all the way through the brass strip and through the metal plate, it was time to countersink the brass strip. And to do this I used my Bosch electric drill. The original plan was to soft solder these brass parts to the plates, but when I stood back and had a good look at the engine, I did notice that countersunk bolts were used in many places, so I thought I would match that. I'm not going to put lots of them in. I'm using 5 BA countersunk bolts, 1 at the end and 3 down the side. Once again I'm using my Proxxon motor tool. I mark out the position and start drilling. And exactly the same as previously described, once I drill the hole I countersink it. In this clip I'm making a very fine adjustment. I need to make sure that the metal plate follows the brass but doesn't look like it's been hammered into position. What I'm actually trying to do with the parts I make for the traction engine is attain the high standard of the original builder. Here you see the right hand motion guard plate in position. It's very easy to attach the plate and remove it should I need to work on the motion. I think that once this is painted LMS Crimson Lake and the bottom part of it lined to match the rest of the engine, it should look okay. 1 down and 1 to go. This is the other side, and I had the idea of holding a piece of 1/4" steel plate against the edge to keep everything in line while I drilled the hole. There was definitely a sequential order for fixing these parts to the plate. First of all I drilled a hole at the front and fitted a bolt. Then the next hole was the one at the other end, and with the help of a ruler to find the distance between the centres, I'm sure you agree they look okay. To my eye, 3 bolts along the length of the brass strip and 1 round the front that you can't really see is the ideal. And now I have 2 motion guards. Both of them fairly identical and in exactly the same position relative to each other. I've ordered some paint from a company called HMG Paints. I use their paint frequently and it's really good stuff. And HMG Paints have a classic colour matching service, and I should receive about half a dozen cans of LMS Crimson Lake in aerosols. Not quite ready for painting yet. First of all I need to chop off the excess thread. I'm using a pair of side cutters for this. When I first chopped off the bolt heads, the whole job looked very rough. but thanks to my Proxxon angle grinder, fitted with its extremely useful flapper wheel, it's a really easy job to clean up the end of the threads. And no sooner had I finished doing this, I then undid the nuts and removed the bolts. I put the 2 polished brass strips in a safe place, and now I'm using 180 grit emery cloth to thoroughly scratch the surface of the brass to key the paint. Where I drilled through some of the mounting holes on the inside, they were a bit rough, so to speed up the job, guess what, I used my Proxxon angle grinder once again. This is a very routine job. It's quite boring, quite tedious, but if you don't do it, there's a good chance that the paint that you apply to the side plates will fall off. Generally speaking, brass does not like paint, and even with modern etching primers and doing this, the paint is never quite as well keyed as it would be if it was on a steel plate. Some viewers may be thinking, well, why don't you use a steel plate, then the paint will key to that a lot better. If you think about it though, steel goes rusty, brass does not, hence the choice of the brass. I do try and think things through. It's almost time to apply the first coat of etching primer, but before I do that, I wipe over the entire side plates using panel wipe. This label still makes me smile. May cause heritable genetic carnage. I think it should say genetic damage, but the word damage hasn't printed out properly. After carefully wiping the panels, using the panel wipe and a clean cloth, the motion guard plates are ready for painting. I take them into the outer part of the workshop, put them on my painting jig, and spray the panels using this etching primer. It's best not to apply etching primer too thick. I just want to get a nice even coat. Hopefully the acid in the paint will do its stuff and etch the brass. If it doesn't though, I really have tried. It took a long time to scratch every part of the surface of these side panels. And as I mentioned earlier, brass doesn't take paint very well. Most of the traction engine externally is brass. And I've spent a lot of time with a small paintbrush repairing that paintwork. But it's all good fun, and if you look at the full size, they are seldom perfect. Just look in the corners. Spots of rust here and there, and cracking of paint and flaking of paint is very common on steam engines. That's one side done, so I'll move it out of the way and start on the other side. A quick health and safety warning: when painting you need to be in a very well ventilated area and preferably wear a mask. A mask will prevent the ingestion of paint particles and COVID-19 viruses and things like that. After I'd sprayed both panels with etching primer, I turned them over on the jig and did the other side, but to let the paint dry first. And that's it for this video. The motion guards are completed and the painting has begun. All I have to say is, as always, stay safe, stay well. Thanks for watching and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you can find other videos that you may like to watch. And by using the playlists, you can actually watch the videos back to back.